Jeb Corliss, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on my podcast, Head Game. Now, Jeb spends more time in the air than he does with his feet.
I am doing spectacular. This whole being alive thing is super, super awesome.
You know what? I love that, mate. I've got that gratitude as well with some of the experiences that you've been through. You know, just waking up, taking that deep breath, being able to open your eyes is we're hugely grateful for that. And I'm on the same
I don't
page
think
as you.
people understand how rad it is to not be dead. Like, this being alive stuff is super cool, and being dead is super lame. I mean, I've had so many friends who died like 20 years ago, and I look at the last 20 years and just go, man, you guys missed out on such cool shit. Life is so amazing, and it's weird because when you're younger, you don't seem to appreciate like what life really is. You know, it's strange. You have to kind of live long enough for life to kind of teach you like how to actually live it. It's strange. It's a weird experience, but I feel really grateful now where I didn't when I was younger, which is strange.
Yeah, you're right though, mate. You know, you go through these life experiences, you know, especially with yourself, you know, you go to these heights of fear, you scrape the barrel when it comes to treading that line of life and death, you know, and that comes through obviously experience. It comes through getting out there. It comes through committing to life and committing to yourself. And that's what I love about you, mate. I love that your attitude, you had this, I'm going to prove you wrong attitude from the age of 6 when you were in the car with your aunt, right? Take me back to that moment.
Yeah, so it's funny because when I was a little kid, I had a lot of dreams, and I was very unrealistic about a lot of things. I had a very active imagination, and, you know, I had a lot of adults tell me that my, you know, imagination was unrealistic, and you know, they may have been right. It may have been very unrealistic, but as it turns out, I was sitting in the back seat of my aunt's car. I was looking out the window. I was like 6 years old. And I remember seeing birds standing on a telephone pole, like on the wire. And I remember them watching off, like jumping off and opening their wings and starting to fly. And I remember going like, you know, when I get older, I'm doing that, you know. And my aunt, you know, kind of looked out the window and saw what I was looking at. And she's just like, oh, you know, you're really young, but when you get older, you're going to realize that's just not physically possible. And, you know, even as a, you know,
that
I'm
humans
like, well,
can't fly.
Yeah, humans can't fly. That's just not realistic. And I'm like, well, maybe not for you. And it's interesting because now looking back, it's really fascinating when people tell you you can't do something, right? When they're saying you can't do this or you can't do that, really what they're saying is, I can't do it. What they're telling you is something that they're incapable of. And it's really interesting because when you say you want to do something, you know, they don't know what you're capable of. They don't know who you are. They don't know what you can do, but they do know who they are. They do know what they can do.
And they don't know what goes on in here, right? They don't
they know what's going on
in the back of your head.
Inside their own little minds, and they try to place their limits on you. And that's when they're telling you. When anyone tells you can't do something, really they're saying they can't do it. And it's a fascinating thing because, you know, at the time I was young, I don't understand that. I'm just being told I can't do something. And even then I was like, yeah, whatever. Maybe you can't, but I'm going to, you know. And that was just my personality. That's the kind of person I was even as a little kid. But it's interesting because, you know, I had my first near-death experience when I was 6. And
wow. Talk me through that.
It's complicated. You know, I was, my parents were art dealers when I was a child, and they used to travel to foreign countries like India, Nepal, Pakistan. And at 5, we went on a year-long trip through India and Nepal. And when I was in New Delhi, India, I got, I think we were like towards the end of the trip. So I went from 5 and turned 6 while I was in India. And, I got something called the Delhi belly, which is like a really aggressive form of amoebic dysentery. And it, you know, my parents took me to a doctor who told them I was going to die, that he could do nothing for me and that I was not going to make it. I'd already lost over a third of my body weight, and I was already in a really bad way. And amoebic dysentery in New Delhi is really bad. Like, it's super serious. It's serious.
Probably the worst place you can get it, right?
One of the worst. And it's serious for an adult, but for a child, you know, a 5-6-year-old kid, it's super serious. And like I said, the first doctor they took me to told them I was going to die. Like, they're like, there's nothing we can do. And they didn't like that, obviously. My parents were like, okay, second opinion on that one. You know, obviously, we're not going. So they took me to another doctor, and this was a more Western doctor, and they said, you know, they're like, well, this is bad, and we're not going to pretend like it isn't, you know, but we're going to do what we can do. And I didn't end up dying, but I did go through 3 months of serious hallucinations and, like, like serious problems. I mean, it wasn't a joke. And I remember it. Like I can still remember going through the suffering. And it's weird because after that, I realized that I was going to die. I just knew it. I mean, it's coming. Death is coming for me. And it was strange.
Right, but not in that moment. You just thought, right, actually, we're mortal. You know, we die.
We're die. Yes, it's when I understood death was coming. Right, not that right this second. I survived this,
it's
going to happen. And I think that a lot of people think that the transition from childhood to adulthood is some age. I don't think so. I think that the transition from child to adult is understanding death. And I've met 90-year-olds who still don't understand death, and as far as I'm concerned, they're still children. Yep. I've also met met kids who have experienced near-death experiences and understand death, and they are, in my opinion, adults. Once you truly grasp what death is, and once you truly accept that it's coming for you, you grow up. You become you understand.
You're forced to grow up, right?
You're forced to grow up.
Forced to grow up.
Well, and it's a philosophical understanding, because once you truly grasp death and you truly grasp it's coming to an end, all of a sudden the little bit of time you get to exist matters so much more. All of a sudden every moment becomes so crucially important to you because you realize they're limited. So at 6 years old, to understand that my life was limited and I only had a little bit of time to get shit done, it made me all of a sudden become much more focused on getting shit done.
And also that you wanted to fly as well. You wanted to get stuff done. You wanted to fly like a bird. And then, that actually came later because
what happened, unfortunately, at that point when my aunt told me, that's not possible. At that moment, I was already like, I can do anything. Nothing can stop me, right? But what's interesting is as a child, and I don't think adults do this on purpose. I don't think it's... But adults do try to teach children how to live in this world and how to exist. And they try to teach you how to be realistic and how to exist, right? And I think in that process, they have a tendency to crush dreams and kind of kick dreams out of you and kind of make you conform and fit into a mold that they think you need to exist on this planet and succeed in the future. And I don't think it's not a negative thing. They're not trying to do something bad to you. They're actually trying to help you without really realizing that what they're actually doing is kind of breaking your spirit.
And limiting you as well. Right?
And limiting you.
I always say that when parents say, oh, be careful, watch out when you do. I'm like, whoa, let them find out. Let them trip up, let them graze their knee, let them get back up. You have
to experience pain. You have to struggle. You have to fail. These are important. Let me put it this way. You're going to learn a lot more from failing at doing something than you will from succeeding. So if your parents are just making you succeed all the time, you're not learning anything. You have to fail at stuff. You have to fall down. You have to break bones. You have to get hurt. You have to run in that race and lose. And this has to happen to you because that's what helps you learn something, right? Yeah. And so what happened to me is through my younger years, like grade school years, and then early teens, I had been so heavily broken by just the society in which I lived and by the people who I was around. They just kind of crushed me into the dirt to the point where I no longer remembered any of the dreams I had. I no longer had dreams. Wow. I no longer had desires. I no longer wanted anything.
Do you remember being in that headspace? Do you remember going from this young sort of, I'm happy to be alive, one of the two, God, this is quite, I'm being quite suppressed here.
It got really dark. And yes, I remember it, but I can't relate to that person anymore. But what I can say is I remember going through an incredibly dark period where I no longer wanted anything. I no longer cared about anything, and I became incredibly suicidal. I didn't see a reason. Oh, this was between 12 to 19. 12 to 18 was where it got really strong. It was at its worst at around 16. 16 was its most acute. And if I hadn't found base jumping at that moment in my life, I don't think I would have survived. What happened to me is I was in a kind of a darkened state, really bad place, and I was sitting on a couch, flicking through endless television channels, nothing, not caring about anything. And all of a sudden, something came on the television that just instantly just caught my attention. And it was a man standing on the edge of a cliff, just standing there. And I remember going, like instantly, what's that guy doing? And all of a sudden, looks back at the camera, he sticks his tongue out, and then he jumps off the cliff into a gainer and just jumps off this cliff. And all of a sudden, that image from childhood kind of flushed back in. That dream of flying, all of a sudden was kind of reignited. And as I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, I've been lied to my entire life. That's what I was talking about. People are doing it. That's exactly what I was talking about. And this sense of it felt almost like electricity. I could feel the hair standing on end. I became super excited, and I'm like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life until it kills me, period. I will never stop. I will do whatever it takes. That's it. That's what I'm doing. So why I say base jumping saved my life is because, you go through peaks and valleys with depression. You'll kind of come out of it and you'll be kind of okay, and then you drop back into it, and you kind of come back out and you drop back in. And during that period, for the next 2 years of my life, because you can't just start base jumping. It doesn't work like that. As a 16-year-old, it's, I call every drop zone, I want to base jump, and they just laughed, ah.
Yeah, can I quickly take you back to that moment that you saw that base jumper?
Yeah.
When you initially saw that person standing on the edge of a cliff, did it get your attention because he was stood on the edge of a cliff just about to jump, or was it when he jumped off the cliff and the parachute opened and he jumped off, and did it sort of take you back to that moment where you were like, I want to fly, sense?
I think it's layered, and it's actually interesting you asked that question because no one's ever asked that. I saw it as a very perfect activity for my mindset as a 16-year-old depressed child, right? Yeah. Which was, if I did it, then I would do something that very few human beings on this planet are willing to do because they're so terrified of dying, right? I wasn't worried about the death part, right? So if I succeeded, then I did something that very few humans, so I felt like I could excel and push it to another level. The best way I can describe it is, imagine being trapped in a dark cave, right? With no light. You're in darkness. There is no possibility of anything. And then all of a sudden, what base jumping became was this little tiny light off in the distance, right? And I could see this light now that I was like, well, let's go towards the light. What is that? And that was base jumping for me, right? And on that journey towards that light, because it takes time, you can't just get there. You're going to have to climb those little hills and climb those little mountains and claw your way towards the light. And what would happen is every now and then during that process, because it took me, I didn't get to do my first skydive till I was 18. I didn't get to do my first base jump till I was 21. So we're talking about, 5 years of time for me to even get to the place where I could do a base jump. So
was that a focus for you? Was that a drive? Was that something that ultimately kept you alive?
It was more than that, though. It's more than that, because let's just say, in 16, that's when I was at my darkest period. But it was still pretty dark through 17, through 18. It wasn't like I was a big, happy, smiley person just because I found purpose. It's more than that. So what would happen is I would get into these really dark places. And what stopped me from doing it was all of a sudden I'd be on the edge, and it's like, no, don't waste it. If you're going to kill yourself anyway, do something with your death. You go base jumping, get that goal. And that's what made me hang on during those really dark periods where things just felt like they were crushing me, and I just felt like, what's the point? And life just seems so utterly pointless, right? And that's what made me hold on. And then in the process of training, right? Because like I said, it takes time. You have to do, 150 to 200 skydives before you can even begin base jumping, right? And to get there, and at the time I didn't have a lot of money. I worked at a movie theater as a projectionist, making, minimum wage, which was $3.25 an hour at the time. It was nothing. So, I would save up money, go do a skydive, save up money, go do a skydive. So it took me almost, it was from 18 to 21 to basically get my A license, which, most people can do that in a couple of weekends, but I didn't have the money. So I had to like literally save up, jump. So it took a long time, which was good. It was actually good for me because by the time I got to base jumping, I didn't want to die anymore. All of a sudden, by the time, at 21, I wasn't suicidal anymore. I had become super happy. I'd met a bunch of people who I enjoyed their company. I found people who were like-minded. I started making friends.
I started becoming community, right?
Community and more than that, the purpose. Like, I think that's what most people like. They're like, oh, whatever. It was John Lennon, like, the meaning of life is being happy. No, not really. The meaning of life is purpose. You have to have a reason to be here, a reason to eat food, drink water, breathe oxygen, a reason to exist. There has to be a reason. You need some kind of purpose. You need meaning, right? Absolutely. And then once you have meaning and you have purpose, then that gives you the drive to go out there and do that purpose, do what that is. And in the process of striving, especially if it's a difficult thing, if it's a scary thing, if it's something that can like break you and kill you and do horrible, awful things to you, for some reason, that struggle is what brings happiness by succeeding and overcoming those obstacles and doing things that were really difficult and literally facing stuff that you don't know if you can do it. You're like, I don't know if I have what it takes to make this happen, right? And then you do it and you're like, and that sense of accomplishment, that sense of doing something really difficult and really painful and something that was really hard, right? And you struggled to get there. That accomplishment then brings happiness. Happiness is like a byproduct, like a really nice byproduct of accomplishing a difficult task. That's really what it comes from. People don't understand. You can't be at peak happiness 100% of the time. Otherwise, it's not peak happiness anymore. It just becomes normal, exactly. Right? So then you get to base jumping, you start doing what it is, and you start, experiencing horrendous shit. Like things that, dude... Let's put it this way, as dangerous as you think base jumping is, as dangerous as people assume, they have no clue. It is lethal and scary on a level that is impossible to comprehend. And I've done a lot of dangerous stuff in my life. I ride motorcycles, I climb, surf big waves, dive with sharks. I do all this stuff. I skydiving. And what you learn when you start doing these more dangerous activities is they're actually not that bad. With the right training and the right preparation, you can actually do them in a relatively safe way, right? Where they're no longer this horror show where you're scared all the time, where it actually becomes enjoyable and fun. Base jumping is the first thing that I got into that is not only every bit as scary and dangerous as I thought it was, but after a decade of doing it, you're like, oh my God, I had no idea. This...
Naivety sometimes the best route, mate. Sometimes being naive is the best route.
Oh, it's so bad that I cannot even describe it to you. It's impossible. I have seen things that I could never have imagined. I've experienced things. I've felt pain on levels that I didn't think were possible.
Take me back to that very first, and not base jump, that very first time you were in the air, looking out the door and thinking, well, this is it. What was your, what sort of fear? How did you manage that fear?
Fear is a process, okay? And anyone who lifts weights or works out in a gym, it's a very similar process, right? So let's say your goal, right? My goal was base jumping, right? That's what I wanted to do. You can't just do that. If you do, the fear will overwhelm you and you will die. It's kind of like being in a gym and my goal is to bench press 300 pounds.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You'll literally just crush yourself. You'll die. Literally, first day, you can't even get the weight off the rack,
Get
right?
the cameras out. Go on, man.
Yeah, this dude's going to crush himself, right? Because you have to prepare. And fear is the same thing. Right? You'll start with the bar at 45 pounds, right? Then you'll put 10 pounders on, and then you'll slowly over time start adding weight, and you'll just keep pushing and pushing until eventually, over enough time, with enough reps, with enough experience, you'll be able to push that 300 pounds. Fear is the same way. Fear, you don't just start, by jumping off the Eiffel Tower and doing a double reverse flip, right? That's not how it starts. It starts with a tandem skydive, right? You go do a tandem, so you're hooked to an instructor. Yeah. He's in charge of everything. All you have to do is go for the ride. You get to have the experience of what it's like to be in the plane, look out the door, step out of an aircraft at 12,000 feet, be in free fall. Then you don't have to worry about controlling the parachute. So that gives you your first sense of fear of like, oh, this is what this is. Okay,
I
right?
suppose it's like exposure, taking the layers off.
It's
exposure, repetition, right?
Well, it's funny because you hear the term desensitization like it's a negative thing, right? You'll hear that all the time, like desensitization in America. They use it as this like negative term.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, that is the process of overcoming fear. You have to desensitize. It's an absolute necessity. If you're going to fight in a ring or you're going to do anything, you have to learn how to cope with that fear, and that comes from desensitizing yourself to it. It actually makes you stronger, and that's what fear is. Fear is you expose yourself to small fear in the beginning that isn't actually dangerous, right? Yeah. It's just things that scare you but won't actually hurt you. That's the first fear. You deal with the fears that won't actually inflict physical harm to you, but just give you that sensation of fear.
I suppose it's back to an example of that. When was the first time that you felt that? Because you said your first one was comfortable. When was your first one when you were like, whoa? And where were you?
I was in. There was a little 300-foot antenna that was about 45 minutes from my house in Malibu, and the antenna was on a little hill in Camarillo, right off the 101 freeway. And I used to drive by it. And it was very early in my base jumping. Like, I had just started. I had, I think 5 base jumps. I think this was going to be my 6th jump. All my other base jumps were off this really high bridge. I considered it to be safe. I felt comfortable there. For some reason, yes, it was scary, but it wasn't, life-altering or life-changing. And actually, it almost let me down a little bit. I was like, man, I was expecting this to be a little bit more. It just didn't seem, I thought this was going to be a lot, more, life-altering is what I thought. But it wasn't. It was kind of scary, but it wasn't this one. So I find this little antenna, and I was driving by it for maybe a couple years, always kind of looking at it. And I'm like, God, I wonder if that's tall enough. But I always thought it was 75 feet tall. It looked like this tiny little thing on this hill. I'm like, that's not high enough, whatever. Yeah. Anyways, I had a buddy who was a pilot who had an aeronautical chart. And the aeronautical chart tells you how tall every building is, how tall every antenna is. Everything. It tells you all obstacles that you could potentially hit with an aircraft. So he had an aeronautical chart of the Camarillo area, and I'm like, hey, I wonder how high that antenna is. So I got his aeronautical chart, I found the antenna, and it said 300 feet. And I was like, holy shit. That's you can base jump that. That's high enough. Just high enough, but it's high enough. I'm like,
I like how you went
base jump
just
that,
high enough.
So, yeah. Well,
basically, it wasn't high enough.
But this is the thing. I know more now than I did then, right? So you have to understand, a lot of this has to do with timing, and it has to do with education. It has to do with preparation. It has to do with training. So what happened is, at the time, I had gone through a little course from a group called Basic Research, which were the first group who was training base jumpers. And my instructors, I had 2 of them. One was Todd Schubothan and Ann Helliwell. And I called up Annie, and I said, hey, I found this antenna, and I had gone there, and I'd scouted it out, and I'd figured out exactly how high I could jump from. I couldn't jump from the top because there was antenna stuff, so I had to jump from under the antenna stuff, so it was 260 feet. So, I needed some information. I was told never to, free fall under 300 feet, that I needed to use a static line, blah, blah, blah. It's all complicated shit. I don't want to get too into that because it's too complicated. But I called her to ask her a very simple, technical question. And the question was, hey, if I use a 48-inch pilot chute and I do a go and throw, how long will it take my parachute to open? And she's like, whoa. What are you trying to jump off of? And I'm like, oh, it's a 300-foot antenna. And I was explaining. She's like, whoa, wait, okay, an antenna. She's all, does it have guy wires or is it freestanding? And I'm like, it has guy wires. She's like, okay, don't jump that. It's like, straight up, I'm telling you right now, if you jump an antenna that low that has guy wires and you get a 90 left or right, you're going to die. That's it. It's going to kill you. Do not jump that antenna. It's a bad jump. Just don't even go anywhere near it. And I'm like, okay, that's really great information. That's not what I asked you. The question is, if I do a go and throw with a 48-inch pilot chute, how long will it take my parachute to open? She's like, Jeb, do not jump that. So you are not ready for something like that. And she's all, and when you do get ready for something like that, you won't jump it because you'll know better. She's like, so don't go jump that. Wow. And I'm like, how long will it take my parachute to open? She's like, Jeb, probably about 150.
It's like the red button, putting the red button in front of you.
I'm just like, how long? She's like, Jeb, it'll probably take your parachute at 150 feet. I'm like, perfect. Click. And I'm like, that's it. 150 feet. I'm jumping for 260. That gives me around, 90 feet to land? I'm good. I'm going to do this, right? And she's just, and anyway, so I end up going out there. So it's complicated. It's such a complicated story. But at the time, I was living in my parents' guest house, right? So that's that's kind of how I was able to like survive. I would work, make my money, go do that, and I didn't have rent because I was living in my parents' guest house. I was leaving to go do this jump, and my mom saw me with my rig. She knew I only had 5 base jumps. I was obviously just new, and she's like, what is there to jump around here? So she sees me getting in my car with my rig, and she's like, hey. She runs out. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I found this 300-foot antenna. I'm going to go base jump it. And she's like, whoa. She's like, whoa. She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, she had listened to me long enough, like, because, you're talking to your parents, you're like telling them and explaining things to them. So she understood just enough to know that was a really bad idea at my skill level, right? That she knew the lower things were, the more dangerous it was, that 300 feet, that's really low. And she's like, no, Jeb, I don't think that's a good idea. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm doing it. And she's like, okay, I've never told you not to do anything in your life. I've always supported you in everything. So I'm telling you right now, if you do this, you need to find a new place to live. That's how serious this is. Ooh. And I'm like, okay, you do what you need to do. I'm going to do what I need to do. And I just got in my car and left. I'm like, if I have to move out, I'll move out. I don't care. Nothing's going to stop me from doing this, right? I called my best buddy at the time, and I said, hey, I'm going to go jump this 300-foot antenna. I'd like you to come and do ground crew for me in case I break a leg or get hurt, so I have someone to call help, right? And he responded with, I'm not going to come watch you kill yourself, Jeb. If you're doing this on your own. You're going to do this by yourself. I am not going to come there. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Then I do it alone. And I'm like, there's nothing that's going to stop me from doing this. That's it. I'm going. And anyways, I get to...
Once something is in your head, Jeb, is it very, very hard to extract it? Do you have to do it to get it done, to tick it off?
The answer to that is no. Yeah. But what I will say is at this particular moment, in this particular jump, this was something I had to do. Because at this point, I didn't feel like a base jumper yet. The jump that I had done didn't really do anything for me. I needed to see, can I do this? Am I capable of pushing through genuine horror? Like, can I do this? I knew what the dangers were. I got what everyone was saying. It wasn't like I was being delusional. I understood. I needed to do this. So I get there. It's like I have to wait till dark because it's obviously the 101, so you don't want to be seen climbing it, so it has to be pitch black. It was a new moon, so it was pitch goddamn black. I get to the hill like around 11 o'clock at night. I kind of just went and had dinner and kind of just was waiting around until it got late enough. Got there at around 11, and what was interesting is I had scouted it the week before, but the week before it was really cold. Tonight was actually a nice warm night, like it was spring, like the temperature was just starting to change. Yep. And I start walking up the hill, and it's pitch black. I can't turn lights on because I don't want people seeing me going up the hill. And all of a sudden, I just hear this sound of, it's a fucking rattlesnake, and it's like right next to me. No. Dude, and I'm like, oh shit,
the
I can't see
warning signs are there, mate.
I'm like, fuck. And when I was a little kid, I used to catch rattlesnakes for fun. So I knew how dangerous they are. And you definitely don't want to be around rattlesnakes in the dark when you can't see them. And I'm like, oh shit. So I kind of like grope around looking for a stick. And I find like a stick, and I kind of push it out in front of myself as I'm walking. And as I'm walking, dude, it's like just a chain reaction. There are hundreds of rattlesnakes. They are fucking everywhere. And this hillside has one road, and around the road is filled with cactus. It's all cactus. So when I jump this thing, I have to land on this road in the dark, covered in fucking rattlesnakes, and around it are cactus everywhere. So I'm just like, this is insane. Like, what am I?
I'm definitely doing it.
What am I doing? That's actually not what I was saying. What was funny is I was tricking myself into doing it. So what I was saying is I'm not doing this. So I'm walking up. I'm like, I'm just going to walk up there, and I'm just going to go take a look. That's all I was doing, right? So I'm walking, and I'm like pushing rattlesnakes out of the way, and I'm like, they just keep going off. I get to the fence, which is a razor wire fence. I take a jacket, throw it over the razor wire, climb over the razor wire, get into the antenna. The antenna is so tiny, it's 300 feet. So it has one light in the middle and one light on top, and the actual ladder's on the outside. So I'm climbing a 300-foot ladder on the outside of an antenna, doing this with no protection. You fall, you die, you know? And I'm just climbing this ladder. And as I'm climbing, I'm just like, I am not going to do this. Like, this is not happening. Like, I am not doing this as I keep moving. And as I'm going further, my heart is literally beating in my chest in a way that it's impossible to describe it, because it actually feels like it's moving up and into my throat. Like it's actually trying to escape. Yeah. It's like my heart's trying to escape out my mouth. Like it doesn't want anything to do with this. It wants to get away from me. It's like, what are you doing? And the horror and fear gets more and more intense because I know I'm going to do it. Even though I'm telling myself, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to do this. I get to the 260-foot mark. The antenna is shaped like an A. So it's got a bar here, and a bar here, and they're like in these like marks that they basically hook together. And I get inside the antenna, and I'm sitting on one bar with my feet on the other two, and I'm looking down. I can see through the antenna all the way to the ground. But it's really dark. It's like super pitch black. And I'm sitting there, I'm kind of like looking out, and it's totally calm, not a breath of air, literally zero wind. And I'm looking down the freeway, and I just see cars just snaking off in both directions, the red and like white lights. And you're just kind of sitting there going, and it was so surrealistic. Like, it's so surreal, it's hard to even, your mind goes into this super strange place, because I'm sitting inside an antenna 260 feet off the ground, just watching cars, pitch black. I can't see the road I'm supposed to land on. I can't see shit. And I'm just like, and I start telling myself, like, I'm not ready for this. Maybe after I do, I go to Norway, I do some big jumps, maybe I'll get ready for this and I'll come back. I'm not doing this. As I'm telling myself that, I get my pilot chute out, and I'm like starting to get my pilot chute ready. And I'm like, there's no way I'm doing this, as I slide out the antenna, and I'm like hanging out, and I'm like looking down. And right then I'm like, I am not going to do this, as I push off. And I remember pushing off, and this has only happened to me a couple times in my life. And usually it's during accidents. This is the only time I've ever had this happen when it wasn't an accident. And what happened is I push off, and I throw the pilot chute, and then everything freezes. Time just stops. Like everything's just, and it's literally, time all of a sudden just distorts and starts stretching. And all of a sudden, like seconds are stretched into what feel like minutes. Like it's the most
I get that.
Bizarre experience when all of a sudden time just goes.
And it's in that moment, isn't it? It's in that specific moment. It's not moments, it's that moment.
It's that moment. And what I'm doing is I'm just frozen, and I'm looking down, and all of a sudden I can feel the hair standing up on the back of my neck. I can feel the air literally touching my skin. I can all of a sudden look down, and I can see. Like, I was pitch black. I couldn't see shit. And now all of a sudden, I see the razor wire fence. I can see the road. I can see the cactuses. All of a sudden, I'm like, my senses all of a sudden became super hyper aware. And as I'm looking down, I see the little red light that marks the center of the antenna. And I'm just watching it slowly start coming. And all of a sudden, I pass the little red light that marks the middle. And as I pass that light, my brain all of a sudden does these like really quick calculations. And it's like, wait a minute. You've just gone more than half the antenna. Your parachute hasn't opened yet. You've gone more than 150 feet. Oh shit. You're going in. Like, uh-oh. And I remember seeing the razor wire fence, which was going to be my impact point, and I see it coming, and I'm like, oh shit. And I remember bringing my hands up and like bracing for impact. Like I'm gonna like, okay, I'm hitting this friggin' like razor wire fence. So I bring my arms up, and right as I do this, I hear this sound of Velcro going. And what that is at the back of the shrivel flap of my parachute, it goes, and then all of a sudden my parachute opens. Dude, it felt like someone had taken me and placed me against a brick wall and took a baseball bat and just hit me in the chest with it as hard as they could. And literally just like, boom! And the impact of opening was so strong that it almost knocked me unconscious. And I'm like, Grr! And I'm like, holy shit. And all of a sudden I'm so low, I don't have time to grab toggles. I just grab one rear riser. I'm turning as I impact the asphalt of the road, and I bounce off the asphalt sideways. So I hit the asphalt, bounce, and I'm laying in the grass because there's like grass on the side of the asphalt. So I hit that, slide off, get into the grass, and I'm just laying there like shaking. And I remember my entire body just vibrating. And then I remember like standing up and I could see everything. And I could actually hear little insects crawling in the grass. I mean, and I was I was connected and wired to the reality and the universe in which I existed in a way that I've never felt. I mean, it was so powerful. And all of a sudden, I'm like, that's it. I'm a base jumper now.
Having done my research, you went to South Africa, tabletop, you jump off, you injure yourself, and then you think to yourself, right, I'm going to go back there. And then you mess yourself up, you fuck yourself up even more. What actually happened on that day?
Well, needless to say, I've been almost killed twice in South Africa. The first time was jumping off a 300-foot waterfall where I broke my back in 3 places, all my ribs, left foot, right knee. I was eaten alive by animals for 3 hours while I waited for rescue. Rescue took 9 hours. Spent 6 weeks laying in a South African hospital on my back, broken, completely shattered.
How did that happen?
I messed up. I was new. I only had 40 base jumps. It was in 1999. Like I was in the very early stages. Basically, it's funny because it was the beginning of my career. And my career ended with a career-ending injury. Like, there was an injury that should have stopped me from base jumping. Like, any normal, sane human would have been like, okay, that's it, I'm done with this. And the doctor even said, he walks into the, when I'm in the emergency room, and he comes in, he's like, I bet you're never going to do that again. And I'm just like, actually, the only 2 things in the world that are going to prevent me from base jumping are quadriplegia or death. Anything short of that, I'm going to keep jumping. And he just looked at me and he's like, whoa. And he's like, all right, well, I guess you'll keep jumping then. But that at that stage in my life, there was just nothing. I mean, I didn't care. The only reason I was getting better, the reason I went to rehab, the reason I worked out and fixed my back and fixed the injuries was so I could jump again. That's all I cared about. That's all there was. So that was, in 1999. And then the one you're talking about was in 2012. I was filming for Real Sports on HBO. We were filming an episode. At that stage, I'd already been earning a living from base jumping for, at least, I think at that stage it was like 13, 14 years. Yeah. I'd already been earning a living as a base jumper. I'd already done countless documentaries. I'd already done countless TV shows. And I was already filming, and I'm doing a show now for Real Sports and HBO.
And this is why it's so interesting, this one, because, you're experienced, you're at the top of your game, you're at the top of the game. And this is why I just wanted to know about your headspace. Was it an error by you? Did you go in overconfident? Did you go in, did ego get in the way? Did you know what I mean? This is why it's so interesting, that moment.
The reality of the situation is all those things come to play. But really, at the end of the day, it's simpler than that. The real reality is wingsuit proximity flying has very small margins for error. And when you make mistakes, the mistakes are very serious. Usually, the mistakes equal death. Like, if you mess up while proximity flying in a wingsuit, you will most likely die. And unfortunately, I'm a human being. And human beings make mistakes. And that's one of the reasons why base jumping and especially wingsuit proximity flying are so dangerous. Because you are a human, you're going to make a mistake, and when you do in this sport, it's going to be serious. That's all there is to it. And the best way to put it is, yes, we can go through the list of mistakes, but I'm a human being, I messed up, I impacted flat, solid granite. I was flying at an angle, but the people keep arguing if it's granite or, Cape stone, whatever it is. It's flat, solid rock, right? Rock. Flat, solid rock. I impacted over at 120 plus miles an hour. Okay, I hit at terminal velocity, which to bounce off flat rock at terminal velocity is not a survivable accident. You will die. Like, I had a friend get ripped in half doing this exact same thing. So, I impacted, and when I hit, I knew I was going to die. Like, it was an unsurvivable. It was so strange because I'm coming in. I've set up a target. It's a balloon. Coming in to hit the target. I think I'm good. Everything looks fine from my perspective. Everything's looking okay. And I'm coming for my target, and I hit my target. But as I hit my target, all of a sudden I'm tumbling, and I can feel my legs are crushed. And I didn't even realize I was going to impact until after I impacted. And all of a sudden, I'm tumbling, and my legs are crushed, and I can feel them crushed. Like, my legs are gone. Like, I don't have legs. I'm like, I'm destroyed. I'm going to die. Like, I realized instantly, I just went in. I just impacted flat rock at terminal. I mean, I was building speed. Like, I was going as fast as I could go. And I'm like, I'm dead. There's no way I can live. And my brain instantly split into two separate places. You know, and this is where time distortion happens again, where time just goes and stretches out. But this time, the time distortion was even more bizarre because my brain went two different places. So one part of my brain was doing calculations. It was all math. It's like, okay, you're tumbling, regain control. So I'm regaining control with a broken wingsuit, destroyed body, and I have to fly over a series of 3 ledges or die. So my body goes into just automatic, okay, what do you need to do to survive? And it's just, that's all being calculated. Okay, ledge, you got to get over that ledge. Okay, there's no ledge, you got to get over that ledge. Oh, you got to get over that ledge. You don't have the altitude to pull. And then my brain is just doing this. And then another part of my brain is having a philosophical conversation with me. And it's just like, well, you're dead. It's unsurvivable. You just impacted flat rock at terminal. You can't survive. It's unsurvivable. You're going to die. So the question is, how do you want to die? Do you want it to be slow, agonizing, and painful? Or do you want it to be quick? Those are your two choices. But you're going to die. So I could either pull and land and slowly bleed to death while I'm waiting for a rescue, which I know from experience, being part of quite a few of them, that if they send a chopper, it's probably 45 minutes, maybe an hour, is how long it will take for them to get me off that mountain. I will be dead probably within seconds, minutes, maybe a half hour if I'm lucky, depending on the damage to my legs. But I was sure that they were completely shattered and destroyed, and I was going to bleed out, almost certainly. So I'm like, I can suffer for maybe a half an hour and die, or I can just not open, go head first, and just be done with it. And it was an incredibly difficult decision to make. It would be like somebody coming to you and having a gun and saying, I'm going to shoot you in the head or the stomach. You get to die one way. You want to suffer or do you want to be quick? And you have to make the decision. Am I going to suffer through this or am I just going to make it be finished? Because I'm not going to live. And what's interesting is that the part of my brain doing all the calculations all of a sudden is like, okay, I cleared the 3rd ledge. I had as much altitude as I was ever going to have. It's like, you pull now or you die. This is the moment.
Now or never.
It's now or you're dead.
Yeah.
And the part of my brain that was kind of thinking about this is like, well, let's see how much time you can get. If it's 1 minute, I want it. If it's 2 minutes, I want it. If it's 10 minutes, I want it. I don't even care if it's suffering and pain. I just want time. All of a sudden, I realized the only thing that actually matters in life is time. That's it. As long as you're alive, anything can happen. Anything's possible. But the second you're dead, that's it. It's the end of all possibilities. It's finished for you. So I decided, you know what? I want the time. So I pulled. And I had a 2.5 canopy ride with line twists, impacted a second time, broke myself some more. And then I laid there suffering in pain. And it was like 120 degrees that day. It was like breaking records for heat. And I'm covered in black. And I'm being cooked alive. And I was white. My legs were broken open. And the blood was everywhere. And it was so painful and so horrible. But I will say this, going from a suicidal teen, right, who didn't want to be here, who then went through that experience and chose life, in that type of situation.
We have a choice.
It's
life. I love
it's
that,
absolutely fascinating to me. And I feel blessed. I feel very fortunate that I got to a place in my life where I was so content and so happy and understood that life is what matters. That time you get, that little time you get to exist is what means something. And, if you're suffering, if you're in a dark place, just realize, dude, hang on. You never know. As long as you're alive, there's the possibility of better things. But the second it's over, man. And it's over forever. You get this.
You said it. As long as you've got that time,
Yep.
You give
Endless
yourself more
possibilities.
time because that's where the opportunities,
Yep.
possibilities can come from, right?
Yeah.
I love that, mate. I love that. Well, listen, what a note to finish up on, Jeb. That was amazing. We could easily have turned this into a 2-hour podcast, but unfortunately, we are out of time. But Jeb, I love your energy. I can feel your energy through the screen. Honestly, it's very rare that you get that. I've experienced that with a few people, and you're one of them. You know, you've hyped me up for the day now, which is always good.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I had a fun time talking to you too, buddy.
Mate, it was great. It was great, Jeb. Listen, quick one, just to quickly end up on, what's the next jump for you?
Doesn't matter. Honestly, dude, my life, I could never jump again and be content. At this stage, I'm just a happy human being who wakes up every morning stoked to be alive. Anytime I can go to the bathroom by myself without a bedpan is a freaking epic day. So there'll be other jumps, but they don't mean anything.
Love that. Thanks so much, Jeb. You're a gentleman. Thank you,
buddy.
mate.
It was fun.
Salute you, mate. Thank you.